The third time Marla had to personally mop up a warehouse spill caused by the CEO's visionary overnight freight experiment, she didn't say a word, didn't curse, didn't even sigh. Just rolled up her sleeves, found the mop closet herself, because apparently even janitorial keys were out of reach for someone in logistics support, and got to work. That's who she was. The silent gasket keeping a rusted engine from backfiring into flames. And everyone in that god-forsaken building knew it. Well, they knew the results, but never her name. She'd coordinated disaster relief shipments during a hurricane with half her staff stuck in flooded towns. She redesigned a routing matrix that saved the company $1.2 million. She'd even stepped in when the CEO forgot to file a vital customs clearance and smoothed it over with one phone call and a box of bourbon-laced biscotti sent to the customs agent's diabetic wife. Did she get credit? Nope. She got a Starbucks gift card with $3.74 left on it. That's why when Sylvia, the wife, capital T, capital W, turned to her at the corporate charity gala, wrinkled her nose like she'd smelled Marla's salary, and hissed, "The help shouldn't speak," Marla didn't flinch. She smiled. The tight-lipped, clenched-jawed smile of every woman who's ever had to remind herself that orange jumpsuits aren't flattering. And hey, real quick before this train wreck barrels further downhill, if you're one of the 97% listening without subscribing, maybe hit that button. It's free, takes half a second. And the crew behind these stories lives off that tiny dopamine hit. We don't ask for severance, just subscriptions. Back at the gala, Marla nodded politely, holding Sylvia's champagne flute like a servant in a Merchant Ivory film. The flute, by the way, was empty and sticky. Someone had double-dipped in the chocolate fountain. She didn't care. Her fingers were already used to cleaning up everyone else's mess. What made this different, lodged like a splinter behind her eyes, was that Sylvia hadn't said it to be cruel. No, that would have been too human. She'd said it like a fact, like gravity. Like the sun rises in the east and Marla doesn't get to open her mouth at meetings. The room had kept talking, laughing, clinking glasses over foie gras sliders and venture capital projections. Nobody batted an eye. Marla stood there with that smile for 2 more hours, handed out flutes, smoothed her blouse every 15 minutes, breathed through her nose while Sylvia giggled with her husband about downsizing fat and operations. She knew what that meant. Knew it like you know a migraine's coming by the twitch in your eyelid. 2 weeks later, she got looped out of a strategy meeting she used to run. Not a word of explanation. Just poof, calendar invite revoked. Her assistant, scared to death, offered a mumbled excuse about streamlining. Same day, she noticed her department's cost centers had been quietly recategorized. Subtle, invisible shifts. Like rats fleeing a sinking ship they forgot she designed. The CEO came by her desk, didn't sit, didn't smile, just placed a folder on her keyboard. Said, "Do what you do, Marla," then winked like he was God handing down commandments. Inside, a budget analysis prepared by external consultants. Translation, a neatly sanitized hit job blaming her team for margin erosion in Q2. She closed the folder slowly, fingers trembling not from fear but restraint. Because if she screamed, if she dared to raise her voice, she'd become the angry woman, the overemotional. The reason they needed fresh leadership. So instead, she smiled. Again. But this one was different. This one had teeth behind it. Because deep in a drawer at home, beneath her W-2s and a stack of expired CVS coupons, sat a folder she hadn't opened in years. Labeled Lefevre Holdings LLC, a relic from her MBA days, created in case she ever went independent. Forgotten by everyone, including the company's own compliance systems. Not by her, not anymore. Marla's inbox turned cold. Not quiet, cold. Like the company's arteries had rerouted without telling her. Updates she used to get daily were now going to a special committee. Meetings that once defaulted to her calendar suddenly required a strategic alignment request. The VP of Ops, a guy who couldn't spell logistics without autocorrect, started CCing her like she was the office plant. And when she asked about it in passing, he gave her that corporate smile that says, "I hope you don't ask again." Then the audits began. Not formal ones, no suits from Deloitte. These were quieter. A fresh intern from Dartmouth snooping around for benchmarking. A new analyst poking into vendor contracts she'd already optimized to hell and back. All smiling, all clueless, all armed with clipboards and questions that screamed, "We're about to bury someone alive, and it might be you." She kept a spreadsheet, not for them, for herself, time-stamped, cross-referenced. She tracked every irregularity, every asset reallocation, every note from IT where permissions were quietly changed without notice. Her fingers typed like they were filing indictments. Then came the reorg deck. She found it by accident, or maybe fate had a flair for the dramatic that day. A junior coordinator left the document open in a shared folder called Q4 Prep. That kid's probably in marketing now, sipping pumpkin cream cold brew and wondering what he clicked wrong. But Marla opened it, scanned it, and read it again, slower. Page 14, Phase Roman 2 Cost Consolidation Strategy. Page 17, Underperformance Metrics Ops and Logistics Division. Page 22, Proposed Transition Structure, VP Replacement, Phased Exit of Key Personnel. And there it was, in bland Helvetica and HR-approved bullet points. Her legacy flattened into a line item under redundancies. They weren't just scapegoating her, they were strategizing her funeral. Still, Marla said nothing, didn't storm into the CEO's glass coffin of an office, didn't print it out and staple it to anyone's smug forehead. Instead, she filed it into her own little war chest. Same place she kept the updated shareholder bylaws. Same place she kept the original severance policy draft with her old routing code on it. Because while they were busy planning her execution, Marla had begun planning her resurrection. And yet, humiliation parade wasn't done. Sylvia, ever the gleaming blade in pearls, decided to host another charity gala, this time for something performatively tragic, like urban youth rowing scholarships. The kind of event where rich white people pretend they're saving the world by drinking rosé and ignoring the waitstaff. Only this time, Marla was the waitstaff. "Can you help with service?" her boss had said. "We're short-staffed and you're so reliable." So there she was, in a rented black dress and sensible flats, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres past the very people who'd once asked for her strategy briefings. One exec didn't even recognize her. Another did and gave her a 50 like she was valet. But the gut punch came between the shrimp skewers and mini quiches. Two board members, half-drunk and overdressed, stood near the garden hedge with Sylvia, their voices just loud enough to slip through the hedge. "Someone needs to take the hit," one said. Sylvia's laugh was a sound Marla would remember for the rest of her life, like a glass of wine being poured down a drain. "She's perfect," Sylvia said. "Loyal, quiet, and disposable." That's when Marla realized it wasn't just personal, it was surgical, and if they were going to make her into a sacrifice, she was going to become the kind that scorches the altar. The CEO was in his office, feet up on the desk, sipping something expensive from a glass too clean for a man who's never lifted a pallet in his life. Marla knocked, not because she had to, but because formality was the only language these bastards respected. He looked up, offered a smirk like they were sharing an inside joke. She kept it brief. "I've seen the reorg slides, you're pinning ops." He didn't flinch. Just swirled his drink and said, "It's not personal, Marla. It's politics, politics." Word oozed out of his mouth like expired mayonnaise. She wanted to laugh. Instead, she asked that why I'm not in strategy meetings anymore, or because Sylvia thinks I clash with the table linens. He shrugged, as if gravity itself had stopped mattering to him. "Look, the board wants clean margins before I exit. We need someone to own the dip. You'll land on your feet. Translation, you'll take the fall so I can cash out looking spotless." She walked out without another, knuckles white from clenching her notebook. Later that afternoon, she got the calendar invite. A one-on-one with HR, subject line, transition planning confidential. The HR rep, a kid who probably still had his college diploma framed over his toilet, started with "We're exploring a soft exit" and ended with "generous transition support pending your cooperation." The number they offered was insulting. 6 months of salary, no retention bonus, no NDA penalty for the company if they badmouthed her behind closed doors. Just a neat little check and a slide deck thanking her for tenure. Not contribution, not leadership, just time served like prison. Marla went home that night and didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even text her sister, who would have immediately suggested spiking Sylvia's gardenias with laxatives. Instead, she poured herself a mug of wine, yes, mug, not glass. The dishwasher was full, and opened her laptop. She logged into the old internal legal archive. It was half obsolete, barely updated since the company's original founder handed the reins to his hedge fund golf buddies. That was before the current CEO, Mr. Politics, had streamlined legal into something more decorative than functional. But Marla remembered things. She remembered a project from 8 years ago, hush-hush shell structure designed for international risk shielding. They needed someone to handle the paperwork, someone meticulous, trustworthy, invisible, so they'd given it to her. One of the sub-entities, she recalled, had a weird routing origin. M.A. Lefevre Holdings, that was her name, her maiden name. She'd registered it during grad school for a consulting dream that never panned out. The company used it for one transaction, maybe two, then forgot about it. She didn't. Digging deeper, she found the severance clause. The CEO's golden parachute. A grotesque cocktail of equity bonuses, performance shield clauses, and deferred tax shelters, all routed through a matrix of LLCs. And there it was. Buried in the disbursement protocol, final transfer routing and compliance verification to be processed by internal operations oversight officer. That was still her. She checked the system. Her name, her signature, authority, still active. No one had scrubbed it, not legal, not HR. Not even the CEO, who probably thought delegation meant assigning blame by volume. That's when the ember in her chest, the one Sylvia lit with that help shouldn't speak hiss, flared into something molten. Marla didn't want a severance. She wanted his. Marla's kitchen counter turned into a war table. Legal printouts stacked like sandbags. Post-it notes bloomed across the cabinets, yellow for compliance, pink for routing paths, red for liabilities they're pretending don't exist. Somewhere between the pasta strainer and the coffee grinder sat a 2016 NDA from the company's Luxembourg affiliate, annotated in black Sharpie like a manifesto. She hadn't slept properly in 4 nights. Coffee had been replaced by black tea and adrenaline. Every click of her mouse was a scalpel through their corporate armor. She wasn't just reading documents, she was dissecting them, extracting every rotted clause they'd tried to bury under layers of legal drywall. It started with a breadcrumb, that single clause in the CEO's severance agreement. A line so boring it almost lulled her into skipping it. Final transfer authorization contingent upon departmental signatory routing as defined by Ops Oversight 4.1.2 protocol. Ops Oversight, her domain. That's when she logged into the legacy routing system, old, clunky, coded in a presume era by some sadist who thought Java applets were the future. But it still worked. Still respected permissions that it hadn't restructured because no one bothered to read them. And right there in the administrative console, her name sat like a landmine, M.A. Lefevre primary routing officer active. They hadn't even updated it when she married. No one noticed. No one ever noticed. She opened another folder. Her old MBA portfolio, back when she still believed in startups and thought ethics was more than a syllabus line item. Inside, the Articles of Incorporation for M.A. Lefevre Holdings LLC, dated 2012, State of Delaware. She'd set it up during an internship for a consulting idea that fizzled the moment student loans called Shotgun. But it was real, still active, still clean, and completely disconnected from her married name. The perfect ghost. She pulled the CEO's golden parachute apart line by line. There were 4 shell companies between his severance clause and the final deposit. One in Delaware, one in the Caymans, one buried in a real estate rate in Iowa for some god-awful reason. And then, the final routing node, Internal Ops Transfer Queue. She dug through archived HR documents. Turns out, routing policy for high-level compensation packages hadn't been updated since 2017. That meant the authority to finalize those transfers still ran through the old system, still respected her title, still allowed one final override. Marla sat back in her chair, then laughed, a dry, wheezing bark that startled her neighbor's dog through the kitchen window. Because of course, the CEO didn't clean up his own damn paperwork, and like that assumed the world was auto-correcting. That once they signed, the universe just lined up and curtsied. Except it hadn't, because the help was still holding the pen. She tested it quietly. No actual changes, just test transactions in the sandbox environment. She routed a mock transfer to Lefevre Holdings. It worked. No flags, no alerts, just an automated compliance message, transfer queued, pending batch submission. She triple-checked the back-end logs. No one saw it because no one ever watched her. Not really. Not when she was fixing freight backups in Philly. Not when she rerouted vendor payments during that internal embezzlement scandal they hushed. Not when Sylvia made her serve canapes to the same execs who now plotted her removal over Martinez. This wasn't a system flaw. It was their flaw. She wasn't going to steal anything. She was going to reroute it. From their Golden Boys offshore payday to a dormant LLC no one remembered, owned by the woman who cleaned up everyone's messes. One document, one clause, one signature block they forgot. She didn't need a megaphone, just a cursor. Marla made the change on a Tuesday morning. Nothing dramatic. No mission, impossible soundtrack playing in her head. Just the low hum of the office HVAC and a half-eaten banana on her desk, browning at the edges like everything else in this place. She wore her reading glasses, clicked 3 drop-down menus, and typed 7 digits into a routing field. Then she pressed submit. That was it. Just like uploading PTO hours or approving a vendor invoice. Except this particular approval rerouted $8.2 million through a holding company buried so deep in the paperwork graveyard it might as well have been carved into a tombstone. And the best part? It was within policy. Technically, she hadn't changed a damn thing. She used the correct protocol, followed the existing authorization tree, and logged the update through a standard compliance batch. The document was even marked with the right ISO code. Hell, if the auditors looked too close, they'd probably thank her for keeping the files so clean. She knew better than to get cocky. That would come later maybe, if the world didn't collapse first. For now, she added the transfer to a batch of 27 other transactions. Quarterly vendor payouts, a bonus release for the marketing VP who thought QR codes were a little edgy, and 3 overdue vendor invoices for biodegradable shipping foam. All queued, all approved, all innocuous. She leaned back, adjusted the lumbar pillow her chiropractor guilted her into buying, and clicked release batch. System, transfer group, confirmed. Processing scheduled, Friday, 6:00 a.m. UTC. There it was, signed, sealed, scheduled for execution before sunrise, before any of them had their oat milk lattes or spouted off about Capital Optics in Monday's all hands. She minimized the tab, got up, walked to the break room, brewed the burnt coffee sludge from the communal Keurig like it was holy water, and smiled, a small one, the kind that doesn't show teeth but does show resolve. On her way back, the elevator dinged, and Sylvia stepped in. Draped in a coat that cost more than Marla's monthly mortgage, she scanned Marla like she was trying to decide whether her dry cleaner would accept human ash. Her pearls caught the flickering overhead light, but her smirk was brighter. "Careful, dear," she said, like a mother correcting a child for standing too close to an outlet. "One misstep and you're cleaning floors." Marla stared ahead at the elevator door, still half reflective from the last intern's overzealous Windex streaks, then replied calmly, "Floors are easier to clean than reputations." Sylvia blinked, that was new. Usually Marla just smiled, nodded, and absorbed the venom. But not today. You say something, dear? Marla turned to her and gave her best Midwestern customer service grin, just admiring the tile work. The elevator dinged again. Marla stepped off. Sylvia stayed inside, her mouth slightly open, not from confusion, but from the creeping sensation that she'd missed something. Something important. By Friday, it would be too late. The funds would be rerouted, locked, irrevocable. And when the fireworks started, Marla wouldn't be anywhere near the fuse. The CEO was on his victory lap, coasting on waves of praise so thick you'd think he cured cancer and balanced the federal budget with one PowerPoint. Every day brought another edible arrangement, another toast in his honor, another employee pretending not to gag while clapping for transformational leadership. His face beamed from the front page of Business Week, next to the headline, "From Grit to Glory, How One CEO Reinvented Logistics." Marla nearly choked on her vending machine pretzels when she saw it. Grit? The man once confused logistics with mailroom magic. He didn't reinvent anything. He just stood on the necks of people like her while pocketing bonuses big enough to name a yacht after. Probably already had. The Q4 surge, no doubt docked somewhere off the coast of delusion. Still, the office buzzed like it was prom season, and he was everyone's drunk chaperone. His assistant circulated a sign-up sheet for farewell reflections. Staff were encouraged to contribute anecdotes or memories of Tom's lasting impact. Marla stared at the email for a full minute before deleting it with surgical precision. She didn't contribute, but she did begin drafting a document of her own, her resignation letter. It was plain. No fireworks, no mic drop moments. Just a quiet, concise paragraph citing personal and professional realignment as her reason for departure. A second page listed the effective date, 2 business days after the next board meeting, and her decision to forego the remaining paycheck for ease of accounting. HR would find it odd, but they wouldn't question it. Marla had earned a reputation for being boringly efficient. That's what made her dangerous. Meanwhile, the CEO strutted through departments with the detached grace of a departing monarch. He shook hands with people he never bothered to greet before. He gave little speeches. "You've all made this journey unforgettable. It's not goodbye. See you on the yacht." He winked. People laughed. Marla counted the veins in her temple. He didn't suspect a thing, not even when he asked her casually, "All good with the transition paperwork?" During a hallway encounter. "All good," she said, and meant it. Back at her desk, she withdrew her final paycheck request in the payroll system. She didn't need it, not now, not with what was coming. Then she cleaned her desk, not like someone packing up in shame. No cardboard boxes, no sad, wilting desk plant, just quiet pruning, outdated memos in the shredder, USB drives wiped, personal logins scrubbed. She left her framed certificates, her coffee mug, even the stupid branded paperweight from the 2020 Logistics Summit. Let the vultures fight over it later. By Thursday evening, her cubicle looked like a demo unit in a furniture showroom. Not abandoned, just reset. Her coworkers didn't notice. Why would they? She wasn't on the list for speeches or cake. She wasn't invited to the send-off dinner at that overpriced steakhouse Sylvia liked because the waiters spoke French. She wasn't in their story, but they were in hers. That night, she walked through the office parking lot alone. The air was cool, the kind that whispers secrets into your collarbone. Her shoes clicked across the pavement in slow, even rhythm. She paused at her car, looked back at the glowing windows. From this angle, the building looked like a fish tank, people swimming in circles, unaware the filter had already stopped working. She smiled, not out of spite, not even out of satisfaction. Her smile was something deeper. Ancient, the look of a woman who had been ignored so thoroughly, so consistently, that invisibility had become her armor. And now it was her sword. The crack came on a Friday, right on schedule. The CFO, man who once declared numbers tell no lies while cooking 3 sets of books for tax season, finally noticed something off in the transfer ledger. He flagged a disbursement labeled as deferred executive comp routing, ops final, routed through a shell entity that sounded vaguely familiar, but didn't ping any red flags in the current vendor database. He raised an eyebrow, adjusted his tie like it was choking out his last brain cell, and muttered, "Leftover holdings. Or have I seen that?" Then, with all the effort of a man who considered Excel a second language but empathy a cult, he chalked it up to some accountant's creative tax shelter. After all, it was year-end. Everyone was laundering something. Still, he sent a vague email to compliance. "Looks odd. Flag if it breaks anything." That was it. No call, no review, no audit. Marla saw the email hit the shared queue. She watched it get marked reviewed. She watched it get archived. She didn't even flinch. But Sylvia felt something. It wasn't a fact. It wasn't even logic. It was a tremor in her ecosystem. The scent of rebellion of someone stepping out of line, and Sylvia ran her little queendom on one principle. No one moved without her nod. The text came late Saturday night. "Darling, we must do lunch, just us girls. Tuesday at noon." My treat. Read. Marla stared at the screen for 5 full minutes before replying, "Of course. Looking forward to it." Tuesday noon, they met at Elan, one of those restaurants where the chairs were too low and the food looked like it was styled by a mortician. Sylvia was already seated, sipping something blood-colored and overpriced. Her smile was stretched so tight it could have been botoxed into place. "Marla, sweetheart," she purred, gesturing like a game show model. "You look rested." Marla sat. "Thank you," they ordered. Sylvia picked at an arugula reduction while watching Marla like a hawk watches a field mouse who just pulled out a lighter. Small talk fluttered around the table, whether the CEO's big send-off, Marla's future plans, and then it came. "So tell me," Sylvia said, swirling her drink, "I hear there were some last-minute changes in the compensation routing. Tom's package, right? Always so complicated. I just adore how you manage those details." Marla sipped her water. Ice clinked like tiny bells. "I do try to be thorough," she said, voice smooth as linen. Sylvia leaned in, lowering her voice like they were sorority sisters swapping sins. "Any surprises I should know about? You know how creative these structures can be." Marla just smiled, not wide, not coy. Just a perfect, calm smile, the kind you give when you're already on the other side of the battlefield, watching the smoke rise behind you. Sylvia's fingers clenched her glass. "You've always been so quietly competent," she said, each word dipped in acid. "It's easy to forget you're even in the room." Marla shrugged, folding her napkin. "That's usually the goal." Sylvia went still. For a moment, it looked like she might throw the glass. Instead, she snapped her clutch shut, stood, and muttered through gritted teeth, "Uppity staff. It's always the quiet ones." She didn't wait for dessert. Marla stayed. She ordered coffee, black. Let the bitterness coat her tongue. Watch Sylvia's taillights vanish down the drive. Let her rage. Let her panic. Let her wonder. It didn't matter anymore. The train was moving, and Sylvia was stuck on the platform, shouting at the smoke. Boardroom, 9 a.m. sharp. The room smelled like new leather and old lies. Mahogany table polished to a psychotic shine. Chairs filled with suits who'd never loaded a crate or met a vendor outside a golf course. They gathered like they always did, smug, caffeinated, and ready to pat themselves on the back so hard it dislocated their shoulders. The CEO stood at the head of the table, basking in the glow of his swan song. His tailored suit screamed, "I win," his Rolex ticked like a countdown, and his face carried that unmistakable smugness of a man seconds from a cliff he hasn't seen yet. Marla was there too, back row, by the coat rack. No nameplate, no spotlight, just her and her envelope. The CFO, already sweating through his undershirt, began flipping through the packet of final approvals. Pages rustled. Phones vibrated silently. Coffee steamed beside crystal water pitchers no one drank from. And finally, the CFO muttered, "The execution of Mr. Clayton's compensation package as approved by the board under Section 4F, Subclause 9. Heads nodded, no one listening, just waiting for the gavel to drop and the steakhouse reservations to kick in. The CFO's eyes skimmed the clause, then slowed, stopped, brows furrowed. He blinked as if trying to defog his glasses. Then read aloud, "Disbursement to proceed via designated final routing, irrevocable transfer to another pause. Lefever Holdings LLC," silence, that sharp, thudding, thick kind of silence, like the oxygen had been replaced with molasses. The CEO laughed first, awkward, arcing, "Wait, what?" He stepped forward, reaching across the table like he could claw the paper back with his bare hands. "To who?" he barked. The CFO didn't answer. He just looked up, face pale, eyes locked on Marla. That's when the others turned. One by one, like a ripple of realization. Marla stood, no theatrics, no mic drop. Just a woman in a slate-gray blazer who'd been overlooked one too many times, holding a single white envelope. She stepped forward, placed it neatly beside the CEO's untouched espresso, and said nothing. Not a word. Her expression was calm, serene, the kind of peace only available to people who have done something irreversible and righteous. Then she walked, no rush, no glance back, just the click of her heels across marble and decades of dismissal. Sylvia stood too fast, knocking over her coffee. The dark puddle spread across the table, staining the Severance packet like blood in a bathtub. "Do something." Sylvia screeched, voice cracking like the edge of a plate. But no one moved. The CFO held the clause. Legal counsel scanned the fine print with trembling fingers. One of the junior board members opened a second tab on his iPad to Google Lefever Holdings. Another whispered, "Wasn't that?" Too late. Marla reached the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. Behind her, the boardroom erupted, not with shouts but with panic. The kind of chaos that knows the storm's already here and the roof's already off. Irrevocable. That was the word the CEO kept repeating, like a prayer or a curse. The elevator dinged, Marla stepped inside. As the doors closed, she allowed herself a smile. Not for them, for her. It broke the next morning, not internally, publicly. Some intern from marketing leaked the boardroom memo. Maybe by accident, maybe on purpose. No one really knows. But it hit the wires faster than a Tesla in launch mode. Golden parachute redirected. CEO's payout sent to shell company controlled by ex-employee. Every outlet ran with it. Business Week, the same rag that crowned the CEO king, updated their headline by noon. From grit to grits, ex-CEO left penniless after staffer hijacks payout. Of course, it wasn't hijacked. It was routed. Legally. Properly. Quietly. The company's legal team scrambled like ants on a skillet. Conference calls, red lines, panic Slack threads from people who hadn't read a policy manual since the Obama administration. But clause after clause came back clean. Every document had the right signatures. Every transfer was filed within system policy. Every routing approval passed audit. Irrevocable transfer to MA. Lefever Holdings, LLC, valid, final, untouchable. The board was livid. One threatened litigation. Another screamed about breach of trust and fiduciary duty. Sylvia, according to rumor, threw a decorative bust at the head of HR. It missed and shattered a $30,000 Chihuly sculpture instead. And Tom, the CEO formerly known as King, went dark. He disappeared into the bowels of some white shoe legal firm, hoping to claw back his severance. But all they could offer was a shrug and a six-figure retainer. His golden parachute hadn't just been redirected, it had been repurposed. Meanwhile, across town, Marla sat at a sidewalk cafe with no name, just a couple tables, good espresso, even better champagne. Her laptop was open, screen dimmed to low, displaying one glorious number, $8,211,943.68. She took a sip. The bubbles hissed like applause in a velvet room. It wasn't the money. Not really. That much could vanish tomorrow and she'd still sleep like a baby. It was proof. Proof that the quiet ones, the ones they never saw coming, the ones who smiled while biting their tongues raw, win. Not with noise, not with tantrums, but with leverage, patience, precision. Her phone buzzed. A journalist asking for a quote. She declined. The company's general counsel asking for mutual understanding. She didn't respond. An old colleague texted, "Did you really take his parachute?" Marla replied with a single emoji, direct hit, then turned her phone off. Across the cafe, a man 2 tables down ordered something bubbly and looked her way. She smiled, polite but unreadable. The kind of smile that says, "You don't know me and you never will." The sun shifted. Her reflection caught in the window glass, poised, unbothered, legendary. Marla lifted her glass one final time. To the silence. The help who spoke with a signature. To every woman ever told to be quiet, who waited for the perfect moment to burn the whole script and write a better ending. Sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. This story reminds me how underestimated people often hold the deepest institutional knowledge. The ones they overlook, they're the ones who know where the bodies are buried and which wires still spark. Don't underestimate the quiet ones, they write the last line. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.